This video is brought to you by Incogni. Last Friday, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese confirmed the date of the next Australian election, with him stating it will be held on the 3rd of May. Due to some complicated constitutional business, Albanese was essentially bound to call the election by the 17th of May, although for months no one quite knew when he'd call it, leading to huge amounts of speculation. The decision to call it on the 3rd of May means that there will be a 5-week campaign, during which Albanese will be fighting to continue the recent upwards trend in the polls for Labour, and to become the first Prime Minister since John Howard in 1998 to win a second term. So in this video, we're going to look into the recent polling, which issues are likely to come up in the campaign, and whether ultimately Albanese will win the election. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. Now, it didn't come as that much of a surprise on Friday that Albanese called the election. Not only was time ticking down for him to do so, but he'd also recently pushed a relatively large tax cut through Parliament at speed. Clearly, this was an attempt to capitalise and win favour from voters, who overwhelmingly believe that the cost of living is the most important issue facing them at the moment. The cuts mean that the personal tax rate between $18,201 Australian dollars to $45,000 Australian dollars will be reduced by 1 percentage point next year, and again the year after. In total, this accounts for a cut of up to $268 a year from mid-2026 and $536 from 2027. Now, the thing is, these cuts add quite a bit of pressure to the government's budget. Before the government presented the budget, the deficit in 2026 was expected to be about 40 billion Australian dollars, or about 1.5% of GDP. As a result of the budget, this is expected to rise to a $42.1 billion deficit. Naturally, as leader of the opposition, Peter Dutton opposed the government's budget, describing it as a cruel hoax that wouldn't do much to improve the standard of living. However, The Guardian has pointed out that, as Dutton and the Liberal National Coalition oppose it, they would essentially have to defend scrapping the tax cut. While there is some truth to this, and it does seem that Dutton will repeal it, he's stated that if his coalition were to win the election in May, they'd go further, and that ultimately, under them, taxes would be lower than they would be under Labour, in part thanks to planned cuts to fuel excise duty. This seems to be exactly what Dutton is trying to centre his campaign around, specifically suggesting that the election is a choice between who can better manage our economy, and urging voters to ask themselves, are you better off today? Is our country better off today than 3 years ago? And, well, until recently, it looked like Dutton's focus on the economy was paying electoral dividends. Dutton held a steady 5-point polling lead over Albanese, who presided over a particularly bad economy and a pretty shocking housing crisis, with Sydney and Melbourne among the 10 least affordable cities in the world. A new poll from Redbridge, published the same day that he called the election, asked respondents if they could name anything that the federal government, led by Albanese, had done to make their lives better. 54% said no, to only 29% that said yes. Of those who said yes, 36% said that the government's energy rebate was positive. However, as we detailed in the intro, Albanese has recently enjoyed somewhat of a recovery, and the latest YouGov MRP poll from the weekend shows that Labour are now basically level with the opposition coalition, looking specifically at the two-party preferred vote, with Labour on 50.2% of the vote and the coalition on 49.8%. This would translate into 75 seats, which would put Labour a single seat short of a majority. Despite this, it would put them in a very good position to form a new government. YouGov explains that the turnaround is because of a 1.3% swing to Labour, which sees the coalition fall behind in 10 key marginal seats that they were projected to win under YouGov's previous projection. This is why the latest Polymarket odds have Albanese's chance of winning the election at 56%, to Dutton's 44%, meaning Albanese has gone from underdog to slight favourite in the past few months. So what explains this recovery? Firstly, although the cost of living crisis is still ongoing and many households are struggling with high food, fuel and power prices, inflation has largely been tamed, with it dropping from 7.8% to a mere 2.4% in December. As we mentioned earlier, this is the issue that voters care about most at the moment, and the fact that it's recently started to get better, bundled with the last-minute tax cuts, clearly has started to work in Albanese's favour. Second, it seems that Donald Trump's presidency has actually gone towards helping Albanese and the Labour Party. While it wouldn't be fair to say that Dutton's politics are similar to that of Trump's, it certainly is true to say that he's had flirtations with Trump's populist style. In a major speech at the Lowy Institute, Dutton claimed that he would be able to handle the US-Australian relationship more effectively than Albanese, as he has more ideological similarities to the president. Not only this, but some of the policies advocated for by Dutton are quite Trumpian. He's promised public service cuts, akin to that of Doge, and has promised to hold a referendum on whether the state should deport criminals with dual citizenship, something he's already reportedly started to try and roll back. The issue here is that Trump just isn't a popular politician in Australia. 56% of people think he will be negative for world peace, and 61% believe he will be negative for the Australian economy. Trump's decision not to extend exemptions for tariffs on Australian steel and aluminium probably haven't helped in this regard. Cozying up to Trump, then, might not have been the best idea and might explain the more gradual uptick in Albanese's vote since January. And thirdly, it seems that voters in Australia are beginning to turn away from populist politics following Trump's second term and his attitude towards other Western nations. Albanese hasn't actually really changed much in the last few weeks. Even his budget was relatively moderate. It's just that Trump has turned voters away from populists. Where in January, before Trump's inauguration, Albanese's style worked against him, it now seems to be working in his favour. The inverse, though, is true for Dutton. So to wrap up, it's clear that the polling is changing in Albanese's favour. But what does he need to do to keep up this momentum? Well, clearly the most important thing is to keep hammering home the economic message and to try and paint Dutton as a populist and someone whose association and similarities with Trump would be bad for Australia. Whether he's able to keep effectively making these arguments will ultimately determine what happens on May the 3rd. Now, as we've demonstrated in this video, there's a huge amount of uncertainty in the world of politics and current affairs, often with few easy solutions. Unfortunately, this can be the case online too. There are all kinds of bad actors out there that want to try and use you to make a quick buck. Take, for instance, data brokers. They sell your data to businesses and marketing agencies, leading to more spam calls, texts, and emails. Or, even worse, they can sell your data to even worse actors who can then go on to use your identity. Some data brokers have even been charged with conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud for intentionally supplying data lists of elderly and vulnerable people to scammers. Fortunately, today's sponsor, Incogni, can help to rectify this. They work on your behalf to request your personal data removal. They also deal with any objections and, to make sure that your personal information isn't shared by the brokers again, conduct repeated removal requests. And with their family and friends plan, they will even do this for you and up to 3 of, well, your friends and family. So create an account with our link in the description, grant Incogni the ability to work on your behalf, and sit back as they make you safer. Plus, by using our link, you'll get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Thanks for checking it out, and thanks to Incogni for sponsoring this video.